It is July 907. Magyar warbands are tearing a path of fire and ruin across the kingdom of East Francia. At Pressburg, Leupold, the Margrave of Bavaria, is among the dead after a crushing defeat suffered at the hands of Grand Prince Arpad. The shell-shocked survivors of the East Francian army limp away from the battlefield, their carts filled with the spoiled bodies of their nobles and friends for burial. In churches across the land, prayers for deliverance and the preservation of their homes are whispered night after night. But nothing is enough to bring the devastation to a halt. The people of East Francia, farmer, fighter and churchman alike, must shelter and wait for the storm to pass, as if the Magyar warbands are an act of God himself, a force of nature that one must simply hope does not arrive on their doorstep. The havoc climaxes with the burning of the Bavarian capital, Ratisbon. As autumn approaches, the nomads turn back. The populace slowly dares to crawl from their hiding places and glimpse the all-encompassing devastation. Bavaria, its eastern territories now lost, lies broken at the close of the campaigning season. When the snow melts in the spring of 908, Magyar warbands again ride from their new homeland in the Carpathian Basin. The new Duke of Bavaria, Arnolf II, has no choice but to agree to pay tribute and permit Magyar armies to cross his land to attack other German and Christian territories. This time, the nomads head for Thuringia through the lands of their Slavic allies, the Dalmatians. Another warband advances through Bohemia towards Saxony. Burchard, commander of the Swabian March, does his duty and rides to oppose the invaders. With him are Regino, Duke of Thuringia, and Rudolf, Bishop of Würzburg. All three meet their deaths at Eisenbach, falling with thousands of their men beneath a maelstrom of Magyar arrows. The months after bring hell itself to the lands of the Saxons. Until again, the cold autumn wind signals the Magyar withdrawal, wretched torment left in their wake. All of ancient Germany and Gaul fear the end of winter as they await the terror to resume next year. The descent comes in the spring of 909. Having passed through Bavaria and Swabia, the warbands continuously pillage East Francian cities for 5 months before turning back in mid-August. Re-entering Bavaria, now a tributary of the Magyars, the warband proceeds at a leisurely pace. Their carts and horses are laden with plunder as they slowly make their way back to friendly territory. Thousands of captives trail behind the column to be later sold into slavery. But there is a twist in the increasingly familiar ritual. At the river Rot, in the mid-August warmth, Arnolf II of Bavaria, whose father had been killed 2 years earlier at Pressburg, descends on the encumbered Magyars. Emerging from the woodland, the East Francian host shreds the unsuspecting column and deals them a beating. This military effort was only made possible with Arnulf's emergency measures of seizing church property throughout Bavaria to fund the army, an act for which he became known as Arnulf the Wicked. However, the victory is not total. The swift Magyars evade the Bavarians, who do not pursue for fear of an ambush. Much of the warband continues on their way unobstructed. But it is a bloody nose to the demon that had thus far appeared impervious to German attacks. This was enough to give hope to others around the kingdom, particularly its young king, Louie IV. Louie, commonly referred to as the Child, is barely 17, but he reigned as king of East Francia for more than a decade. For all his youth, Louie is a determined antagonist to the Magyar presence in his kingdom. It was his administration that broke off relations with the Magyar Confederation in the year 900, even though his father and predecessor, King Arnolf, used to hire them for their martial skills in his own wars. One such hired Magyar host destroyed the Italian army of his rival Berengar I at Brenta in 899. But the combination of Louis's adolescent pugnaciousness and the proto-crusading ambitions of advisors like Hatto, Archbishop of Mainz, proved an explosive fusion that brought yet more ruin to the people of East Francia. In 904, Louis had the Magyar chieftain Curțan invited to a parley for a new peace. But upon arriving, Curțan and his entourage were slaughtered. It was this Red Summit that led to the deluge of reprisal raids and attacks that culminated in the blood-soaked fields at Pressburg 3 summers later in 907. But now, in 909, Duke Arnolf the Wicked's victory at the River Rot gives new impetus to Louis's drive to unite all of the dukedoms of East Francia together against the Magyar menace. Louis's court sends out a call to all of the duchies of the realm to rally to the royal banner raised at the southern city of Augsburg. Once gathered, a new campaign toward the Enns River would be mounted. There, the main offensive base of the Magyars would be destroyed. The operation would then continue east into Magyar territory, pushing their routes of attack back hundreds of miles. Gebhard, Duke of Lorraine, sends word to Louis that he raised a strong force from his domains. He will link up with armies from Franconia, Bavaria, and Saxony along the way. Louis's own force, meanwhile, consists of men from the areas of Swabia and Alemannia. Heavy cavalry and large numbers of infantry slowly form the royal army. But traveling at the marching pace of the foot soldiers puts the German operation at a disadvantage to the entirely mounted Magyar force. This shortcoming in speed is compounded by the Magyar intelligence network, as groups of tribal mercenaries still serve within East Francia. They know the area well and likely maintain eyes and ears even within the court of Louis the Child. And so, right after the king's very public call to war, a Magyar host begins assembling and moving towards the frontier at a far greater pace. No surviving source mentions the names of the Magyar commanders, but their strategy for the coming campaign was evident. To avoid the threat of Louis's invasion, they would run head-on into the Frankish armies, destroy them in their own lands, and save their own territories from likely devastation. It is possible, even likely, that Magyar armies were already gathering for the coming season of regular raiding, but now their leaders knew precisely where to find the teenage German king and his host. Moreover, the threat of a unified Frankish invasion compels every tribe to unite and mount an aggressive counterattack. Thus, when Louis and his host arrive at the outskirts of Augsburg in early June, he is informed that Magyar riders are already operating in the area in considerable numbers. This was dispiriting, but not entirely disastrous news. Although Gebhard is yet to arrive with his army from central Germania, Louis's host is still greater than the Magyar force, which amounts to fewer than 10,000 riders. Creating videos is truly my passion, and I'm incredibly thankful to have the opportunity to share this journey with all of you. However, the long hours can take a toll, leading to burnout, especially as I juggle the responsibilities of caring for my ill father. At times, it becomes a lot to handle, affecting my sleep and eating routines, and I find myself shying away from socializing more than I'd like. While we all encounter our own hurdles, it's crucial to acknowledge when extra help is necessary. That's where BetterHelp, the sponsor of this video, steps in. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site, answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or computer via phone call, video chat, or messaging, however you feel most comfortable. It's the easiest possible way to start talking to a therapist. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/HistoryMarche or choose HistoryMarche during sign-up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. Rather than take shelter in the city, Louie's commanders elect to instead make camp, an indication that their army was too large to shelter inside the walls of Augsburg. Well supplied and reasonably confident that they are secure behind their ditches and palisades, the Frankish army eats their evening meal to the sound of whistling songbirds and goes to sleep while the long summer sunset is still some time away. After a final conference with his commanders and communal prayers with his chaplains and guard, their king does the same. But at the crack of dawn, Louie and his men are stirred from their tents by the wail of horns. The Magyar attack has begun. Despite his jarring shock, the young king has a peaceful start to the day in comparison with many of his soldiers, a large number of whom were woken by the choking death rattle of the man lying next to them, pierced by a Magyar arrow that had shot through the roof of their tent. The arrows come from all directions, the Frankish sentries and forward positions impotent to stop the thousands of riders who close in, fire their bow high into the air, and then withdraw on their light horses. The bolts they fire pass through hundreds of yards before coming down in the midst of the camp. The packs of riders exert total control of the area with constant motion, out of range of Frankish missiles, and impossible for Louis's commanders to direct a sortie towards their swirling mass. Louis's bodyguards cover the king with their shields, him being just as vulnerable a target for the deadly projectiles falling from the sky as the rank and file. For a time that appears interminable to the men cowering on the ground under their shields and carts, the bombardment by bow continues, every Magyar releasing an arrow until their allotment runs out. But just as soon as it began, it was over. The soldiers, nobles, and prelates emerge carefully from their hiding spots. The Magyars are inviting them to attack. It is some time before Louis is allowed to move freely by his attendants, raising his youthful ire and irritation. This frustration and thirst for retribution is matched by his cavalry and infantrymen, and the morning's routines are rushed rather than careful. The men take little food, prayers are cut short. Armor, where it is possessed, is thrown on and attached on the move. The Frankish army deploys, cavalry forming the mobile force likely on the wings. They have the ability to charge en masse, but cannot hope to catch the light Magyar riders, who enjoy the advantage of both speed and range with their bows. The Frankish infantry forms the core of the army. Each man armed with a spear and shield can withstand a charge from the enemy, but in the open field, it has no means of pinning down the riders unless they somehow entice them to fight hand to hand. The strategy of Louis's forces on the morning is therefore to endure, hold their ground and survive until the Magyars run out of arrows, or make the precipitous mistake of trying to storm the field. Unfortunately for the Franks, the Magyar army is disciplined and well supplied with arrows. Firing from afar, they wait until the Frankish line must necessarily advance or else wilt under pressure. The hit-and-run attacks continue throughout the morning. As Louie's men come halfway, the agile riders withdraw to a safer distance. Some East Francian infantry contingents give chase. But they are slower than the mounted archers, and charging the enemy only leaves them exhausted and exposed to arrow attacks. The Frankish cavalry is eventually pulled forward to attack, away from the protection of the infantry shield wall. And there the Magyars fire backward in the saddles, cutting many of the mounted warriors down, wounding their horses and shredding their offensive. The survivors return to the infantry sections, and the game begins again. The Magyars fire from upwards of 400 yards away, forcing the Franks to take cover. They then advance again, while maintaining the barrage of arrows. Coming as close as they can to the enemy, the Magyars fall back once more when they come into range of the Frankish archers. When the Franks become unresponsive to the Magyar needling, swarms of horsemen charge up to their line. The nomads engage with melee weapons, lashing their swords against the shields of the Franks, and drawing out the more hot-headed and vainglorious, where they can be finished off in the open. Yet the mass of Franks keep their composure as the hours tick by, and the sun rises to its zenith to mark the middle of the day. Scorched by the heat, thirsty, and above all forced to remain still under the terrifyingly imminent threat of an arrow bolt, the men of old Germania continue to suffer their ordeal. Priests and captains among them shout reminders of their Lord Christ's sacrifice at Golgotha, how their agonies match his own, and that divine mercy will be the path both to victory and salvation. Still, the Magyars come forward, repeating their previous strikes with painful precision. This time, they elicit more of a response. Portions of the Frankish cavalry charge them at full gallop. Some of the Magyars are caught by the unexpected suddenness and brought down with Frankish swords and lance. The majority get away and then manage to shoot down some of the heavy cavalry before the Frankish leaders reassert control and call the knights back to order. The day drags on and stalemate grows. The Franks hold firm and the Magyars continue to swarm, though every sortie exacts an ever greater death toll. As the afternoon shows itself with the slide of the sun toward the west, there is an inkling among the Frankish rank and file that was not present that morning. They begin to sense that they will prevail. They are accustomed now to the Magyar tactics. The arrows and the baiting charges have become routine. It even appears that the once diabolical horse archers are losing their enthusiasm. The Magyars no longer scream in their characteristic fashion when riding up to the line. Instead, they rush forward, engage in desultory stabbing and slashing motions, and then withdraw again. The vigor they previously possessed is now seemingly damped. As they retreat, the Frankish bowmen pick them off. The lack of armor means that every arrow hit is a rider lost. There is a stir of belief and resolution behind the shield wall. Men start to encourage one another that it will soon be over. Shoulders go back, chins rise a little higher. The arms holding shield and spear hum with renewed strength. As if sensing this, the next Magyar attack has a much greater urgency. But there is a desperation to it now. When the Franks see the whites of their eyes, the nomadic riders communicate frenetic unease. The Franks lash back harder, stabbing with their spears, punching with their shields. This time the Magyar attack breaks off with no discernible result. And so it continues into the afternoon. Repeated Magyar attacks are repelled, the shield wall seemingly impenetrable. More and more nomad riders are brought down with bow and spear on every sortie. Louie, the young king, appears to the men at the rear of the line and can be seen and heard shouting rallying words, blessings, promises of rewards. The day turns into evening, but though the sun is low, the long summer light shows no sign of disappearing. The Magyar horsemen are milling in the distance and start advancing again. The Franks move from foot to foot, steeling themselves for the blitz to come. Like clockwork, the shower of arrows flies down. They take cover and shelter as they have done so many times on this day. Next, the horsemen charge. Their numbers committed to the melee are greater than at any time on the day. It seems that finally they will contest the field. The Magyars rush headlong, whipping their light horses and alternately firing their bows straight ahead. The Franks sense that this is their last all-or-nothing effort. Men scream at the top of their voices for their comrades to hold fast. Prayers and cries to the Almighty rise in the air. But the nomad riders pull up and stop before they make contact with the Frankish front line. Their massed charge peters out into erratic skirmishing. The Magyars try to fire at close range, while the Franks stab furiously with long spears and swords. After some time, the Magyar attack breaks off in confusion, and the number of riders withdrawing turns from a trickle to a wave. Some of the Magyar headmen and officers try to rally their tribesmen, but it is to no avail. The Magyars are spent. They shoot backward, but they seem to finally have run short of arrows, and the number of casualties among the Franks is minimal. King Louie reappears at the rear of the line and leads the cheers for his brave soldiers. Every Frank is now zealously ardent, and the pent-up frustration, anger and fear comes bubbling to the surface. In unison, Louis's army starts moving closer to fire on the loitering Magyars, calling oaths and insults. The reply from the Magyars is a tepid round of arrows, easily blocked by the shields. The whole Frankish army joins the advance, even the king, alongside his heavily armoured bodyguards. The Magyars ride a little forward and then withdraw in the face of the overwhelming Frankish numbers. The Frankish cavalry starts to pick up momentum. They are out in front now, goading the Magyars to come and fight them. The Franks cross the majority of the open field, coming close to the tree line of the woods either side. But the Magyars make a limited charge and come close enough that they are within bowshot of the Frankish archers. The infantry are keen to get to grips with them, and the cavalry makes a sortie toward the attackers, but the Magyars wheel off and fall back further. The Franks have had enough of this and start to run. The armoured cavalry does not stop either, and they charge exultantly after the lighter enemy, finally able to spur their mounts forward at the gallop. The Magyars slow down to try to hold them off by firing a few more arrows, but none of them hit a target. The Franks and their commanders are unmindful of where they are. Their focus is solely on the beaten enemy in front of them. All that is on their minds is revenge for the hours of agony they had just spent on the scorching field. They do not look around at the woods that are now surrounding them. And that is when the Magyars finally spring their trap. Thousands of fresh horse archers hurtle out from the shadows in the tree line. The nomads quickly enclose the entire Frankish army, which retracts in the uncountable deluge of arrows that thump into their unprotected flanks. The Frankish cavalry tries to backtrack and reform, but there is no time. Now they are an unmissable target to the nimble Magyars, who are firing on them from all sides. Being separated from the main body of the army, the Frankish horse are completely encircled. Their attempts to break out are obliterated in a hail of arrows. The infantry try to form up their shield wall, but the Magyar attack is too furious, and any weakness in their lines is ruthlessly exploited. Frankish casualties mount too quickly for any kind of organized resistance. Panic finally sets in. The armored cavalry, being so far forward, are by now gone. The infantry turn into an unorganized mass running from the battle and proving easy kills for the pursuing horsemen. King Louie is fortunate to have been kept out of the front ranks, and he is quickly spirited away from danger before the Magyar horde can bring down the rest of his army. Exact numbers of casualties are unknown, but the East Francian army suffered heavily, while the Magyars incurred minor losses. In short order, the East Francian forces are obliterated. Those that can make their way to safety hide in the countryside. Others work their way to walled settlements like Augsburg. Mercifully for the Franks, the Magyars do not yet possess the capability to reduce such protected towns. What they do possess is speed and mobility, and immediately after destroying the royal army at Lechfeld, the Magyars move directly north. They cross 80 miles and engage the army of Gebhard, Duke of Lorraine, on the Rednitz River. In a scarcely believable operation, the Magyars succeed in smashing this second Frankish force just 10 days after annihilating the first. Wails of lamentation ring across the kingdom, for it now lies completely undefended and exposed to the marauding raiders. The young King Louie never recovers from the annihilation at Lechfeld. He dies a little more than a year later, aged just 18. The shock of the slaughter and the failure of his efforts to stymie the invasion were said to have broken his spirit. It would take decades and a change of dynasty within East Francia before the kingdom could rally against the Magyar menace. Until then, with the greatest of its warriors lying dead by the banks of the rivers Lech and Rednitz, the fortune of East Francia would be misery, death, and a fight for survival. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, then don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm. If you'd like to support my work, you can do so on Patreon and get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. As always, I'll see you in the next one.